Welcome, welcome everyone. This is the Legacy Intention series, and I have Laurie joining us today. I've known Laurie for a number of years, and we've done some really wonderful projects together. And I know that she has a deep calling from a legacy point of view, and she is one of the people that I know in this world who intention runs through her like an electrical wave. It's really beautiful to watch, and all the work that she's done. And what I do with all of these videos is that I ask the person to share their first and last name and just give us a little bit about what you're up to. So Laurie?
Thanks, Stephen. So I'm Laurie Maslak. I live here in Calgary. That's where I live when I'm at my workplace as well as my home life. I have been, let's say, I'm on my sixth career. Let's put it that way. I have been everything from a nurse to a career transition consultant to an HR leader to a consultant in leadership and team development. I've worked with First Nations communities, and I've done a lot of work in Appreciative Inquiry. And then I moved into more of a consulting role with management companies. I went back to the healthcare system, but only on the HR side. And then I morphed into a whole new role in safety leadership. And so I have been working primarily in the role of what they call an organizational and reliability consultant around safety for the last probably decade. And so that's where I've been, and that's where I continue to do my work, working with organizations to strengthen safety cultures at the front line all the way through to the board of directors. And so that's primarily the work that I'm doing today.
Wonderful, wonderful. And just to help everyone understand, how do you see, or maybe define, or whatever way you would like to just share your understanding of legacy?
That's a great question, because I've been thinking about that over the last few years as I am in more my twilight years of my career, thinking about what it is that I leave as a legacy. And I've left a legacy, I believe, already in several places, and people keep reminding me of that. Number one, because I've been in so many different organizations and so many different roles, I didn't realize the impact that work had had on a number of people. And so I keep reconnecting with people, whether it's on LinkedIn, or I bump into someone, or I hear from somebody through Facebook, or an email that gets sent, and somebody sort of tracks me down and says, I really want you to know how much of an impact your work with me had, whether it was on the nursing unit or whether it was in a project that we were specifically working on, in a leadership project. But that's been kind of gratifying, because you don't really know that stuff. And people tell you that they still remember either you, or they remember the topic that you guys were actually presenting, or it had a significant impact in how they shaped up to be a leader. So that's pretty impressive. I also taught at the university, and I've taught at a number of different institutions. And sometimes it comes that way as well. I hear about something that we taught at school. So that's one area. Another area is my children. I have 5 kids in a blended family, and they've grown up together. And now I have one of my own daughters who's in HR. So it's nice to be a mentor for her. And she calls me regularly on certain things that she comes across. And she's also taught me a number of things from the new generational perspective that's helped me in my understanding of those generational workplaces. And then I have other kids that are doing other things in different organizations, and they all have had a passion around learning, continuous learning, which was important for me. I was always an advocate for education. And so the kids have developed that as well in their own realms. I've let them do their own thing, and they've all appreciated that. But they do have a hunger for it, and they're also transferring that to my grandkids. So that's nice to see. So that's the second area that I've had an impact and legacy. And I would say the third area that I've had it is my connections to the greater community, whether it's the business community, whether it's my volunteer service work, whether it's people like Stephen, who I connect with on a regular basis in terms of we may not see each other for a year or two, and then all of a sudden a project comes up and it's like the first people we want to talk to, right? So that has been important to me, is to develop really strong connections with individuals over the years. And those connections have come back fourfold in many ways for me. And I'm proud of those. And I'm also really grateful for them, because they've also helped me out when I've been in jams or pickles or any of those things. And I can call on those people. So I appreciate that. So I would say those are three great areas for me around legacy.
So then how would you weave the word intention with legacy?
So my intention, I would say that I became very aware of the whole power of intention probably in my 40s, when I started my teaching at the university. And I started to really ask myself, well, I'd been a career transition consultant, so I'd sort of asked myself, what was I doing? Remember, I'm on my 6th career. So I was kind of saying to myself, how does all this make sense? And I started to identify for myself what were the things that I wanted to continue doing, because they were actually going to get me to a place that I wanted to be at the end. So I had to start from the end in mind and kind of work backward, which is part of the reason that I went and did my PhD and my master's, because I realized that I really loved the idea of teaching, and I love teaching at a master's level. I was probably going to need a PhD in order to do that. I didn't do the PhD so that I would end up being a full-time professor at a university, but I wanted to be able to have that ability to be able to teach in an online program or at a university for continuous learning perspective. So that was one of the reasons. I also started to look at what I was volunteering for. Were they things that was actually contributing to the greater good in terms of the things that were important to me? So I started to get involved with organizations that really promoted women's voice in workplace, that promoted education for kids in disadvantaged communities, that started to look at how do we raise that voice for people who don't have voices in certain areas. And so I started to ask myself, what did I really want to get involved in? And I repurposed sort of some of the things that I was doing and said, no, that's no longer sort of fitting where I want to go. And so I gave some things up and I took some new things on. I also was realistic in terms of my time that I had available for things. So I started to really think about what was important, and I wanted to find balance with my family. I wanted to find balance with the work that I do, the good work that I could do. And also I wanted to start back writing a little bit and contributing back a little bit on my thought. I haven't done as much on that end as I wanted to, but at least I had the intention of doing that. So I started to really think about the kinds of roles that I was going to take and pursue. So there were certain tracks that no longer appealed to me. There were certain tracks in the consulting world was where I really loved, and that's where I stayed. I didn't stay as a full-time employee anymore. That just wasn't what I wanted to do. I felt that I could offer more in terms of the consulting. So I looked at roles that were more from that aspect rather than full-time. And so I just became very intentional in terms of my career path, my volunteer work, my kids and my family life. And I wanted to be able to have a lifestyle that would still afford me to be able to travel, which is why you see the sheep in the background, because that was one of my travels through England. So I just started to be very intentional around what I wanted to do. So that's where it fits in.
So if I was to sort of summarize in there, it was intentional about time, effort, and money.
Mm-hmm.
The time that you had and how you're going to allocate it, the effort that you're going to put into things, and the getting of money, but also then how to use it in a way, like, for example, travel and things like that. So would that be fair? The intention of time, effort, and money, and how you weave it into your life, would that be fair?
Yeah, and I think money has never been sort of one of those big drivers for me. Money has always been something that I needed to fulfill sort of certain basic needs, but money wasn't the big driver. Connection would have been probably my bigger one. So it was time, effort, and connection. So where were those connections? I needed to make sure that there weren't disconnects, because my life previous to that had been a lot of disconnects, and I was doing things for a lot of other people, but not necessarily for me.
And I know, and Laurie has hinted at, we've worked on different kinds of projects and all through the years, from leadership and appreciative inquiry, and done lots of really beautiful, beautiful work. One of the words that, if I was to put as Laurie's middle name, would be the word potential.
Mm.
And I'm just curious, does that bring something forward from a legacy and intention point of view, the word potential for you?
Absolutely. I think that we've got a lot of untapped potential in people because we don't ask the right questions to really get to what's important to people. We sort of put people in boxes or in roles that somehow define who they are, rather than the people defining what it is that they really could do or possibly do. And so potential is really important for me, whether I was in talent management and I was trying to look at systems or processes that really got to developing people's potential as leaders. And that wasn't a capital L leader. That was sometimes just a leader within whatever they were doing, whether it was the receptionist and how they could be a leader for the organization. But it was those leadership skills that I really wanted to tap into. And I think there's a lot of untapped potential in our organizations today. And I am one of those ones that really likes to tap people on the shoulder, find out what it is that actually inspires them, not just motivates them, but inspires them. What are those kinds of projects or the things that nobody has ever asked them to be a part of? Because I think that all too often people go to an organization or a role and they sort of feel like they have to fit that mold. But there's an awful lot that they could be doing that's outside of that if somebody just asked them or gave them the chance. So potential is a good word for me for a second name, because I do believe that there's a lot of untapped potential out there.
Oh, for sure. And I know for those who are 55 plus years young, who may be going through transition and they're looking at that 60 years young door, or the 65 years marker that we seem to have given to ourselves. I won't put a word to it. But Laurie knows because she's worked in this area. It's this 55 plus storyline that is evolving here. Any thoughts from a legacy intention and all the work that you have done for those who might be 55 plus years young and looking at what's coming forward?
Well, it's funny that you asked that, because I was always a proponent that organizations don't tap into the amount of experience, expertise, the wisdom that those people have had. When I look back on my career over all these years, I thought I knew a lot when I was in my 20s and 30s. I probably knew a little bit. And then in my 40s, I was gaining a little bit more. But in my 50s and going into my 60s, I'm probably starting to realize now that that wisdom or that sage advice is based on a whole lot of years of experience as well as the knowledge. And you don't get that just from a book. You don't get that from a course. You get that from hard life learnings that you have to experience for yourself. And I was always a strong proponent that I think in organizations, what would be really useful is, rather than just retire people out, is to find a way to keep that work life meaningful for them. And it might be in a service kind of role, or it could be in something that's a small stipend. You don't want to go too much because we don't want to affect their pensions, and their pension income, but it could be something small that keeps them still connected to the organization. And so I've often talked of, and I took this thought out of a lot of the work that we did with First Nations communities, and that was creating a wisdom council at organizations, a wisdom council of people who don't want to necessarily do a full-time role anymore, but still have lots to offer, where groups or teams or individuals could come to them with a proposal or an idea or a presentation that they're trying to get ready, and use the Wisdom Council to sort of do the trial run through, ask the great questions that they might not have thought of, prepare them so that they get the confidence when they have to present this in front of a senior team, or they have to present it in front of a new client, or any of those things, that the Wisdom Council would basically give them their sage advice in terms of the kinds of things that might help them be successful. And so I've often thought that there was great opportunity to be able to create something like that in organizations, where we don't necessarily have to just sunset individuals in terms of send them off and their merry way and never hear from them again, rather than keep them connected somehow to the work that they love to do, and use that expertise and that wisdom in a very meaningful way for organizations, because I think it's an untapped source.
So from all your experience with organizations, from a people, a person's perspective, and you're a mom and you've got the kids and some of them are having children and all that, I just like to ask, this concept of legacy and intention, we often think of it 55 plus. Is it worth giving effort and time to helping the younger generations understand their legacy intention in their 20s and 30s, so that their life may have a little bit of a different flavor, direction to it? Any thoughts that brings up for you?
I think 20s and 30s is still a time of adventure and exploration. I don't know that they're thinking of legacy at all at this moment in time. I think they're looking to struggle to survive. They're learning how to adult. And I think that I'd cut them a little slack. I think by 35, 40, I think there is the opportunity to really talk about legacy with individuals, because I think people are starting to then see the frustrations of sort of either paths that they've been on that haven't been fulfilling, and they're kind of questioning, what am I doing? And they still have time to make some of those course corrections or to add new things, new skill sets. But I think in those 20s and 30s, I think we just need to give people an opportunity to just sort of start to launch, and there's enough on their plates and enough stresses that I think that legacy probably isn't what they're thinking right then. I think that it's that 35 to 40, 40, 42, maybe somewhere in there, that I think is the really golden years for legacy development, because I think that's when people start to really, they've been in it for a little while, and they're starting to ask themselves, what is it that I really want to be spending my time on? Where am I going? What's the kinds of things that I really need to be focused on? So that's just my own personal piece.
That's great. And that's why I thought I would ask, is because you
Yeah.
do have all of that kind of lived experience from those different angles. And that's what this Legacy Intention series is about, is to explore it, to get different perspectives. And not everyone's going to agree with what is said. I get that. But there's a lot of other people go, you know what? I didn't think of it from that perspective. And the way that Laurie shared that, I think there's something I can do in the workplace now as a form of transition, which is part of my legacy story, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm reaching out and asking a whole bunch of the people that I know from all different walks of life to do the Legacy Intention series. Now, we're getting close to closing out. And as I always do, is there anything in particular that you would like to share with the, being for the world, with the planet, or from the whole? Is there something you'd like to share with us now? A key word, a key phrase, anything at all?
I think the word that comes to me, and maybe it's just because we've been really reflective this last week, being that yesterday was our first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. But I think reflection would probably be my biggest word right now. And what I would say is, I think that all too often our world is crazy and it's been busy and it's been chaotic. And unless we make time for some of that reflection to really search inside who we are, where are we going, what are we doing, what are those things that are not only meaningful to others, but meaningful to self in terms of what feeds or fills my bucket. I think those are really important questions. And we often don't sit down and take the time to actually ask ourselves those things. And so when it comes to legacy, it really is an inward journey. You really need to be asking yourselves. And if you're with a partner, you may be together trying to figure that out in terms of what do we want to leave as a legacy? Because I haven't mentioned much about my husband, but when I started that whole intention of the end game, it had to be an end game with the two of us. The things that we both enjoyed, that we both saw each other doing. He knew that I would likely want to work longer than he did. And so it was about what kinds of things could I do, even if I wanted to live my life traveling or doing some things that weren't necessarily right here in Calgary. What were the things that we could do together? And so that was another reason why I chose to look at things like teaching or to do consulting, where I wasn't stuck in one place. I could move and do those same things regardless of where I was. And so that fit with our end game. And so I think that that's an important piece, and it's helped us as a couple to be able to plan for that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for this, Laurie. I appreciate it, and the perspectives that you're bringing. Again, folks, just to let you know, from a workplace point of view, Laurie's got some really wonderful ideas, and she's done a lot of work with the Appreciative Inquiry world, and she just has a really great understanding of what it means to create connections and this continuous learning component. So if you find yourself on YouTube and you want to ask a question of Laurie, please do. I'll pass it along to her and she can respond. And remember to subscribe, like, comment, share, ring the bell to get the next one, all those kind of things. But what I'm going to be doing with many of the Legacy Intention interviewees is that in 3 or 4 months, I'm just going to see if they would like to come back and do a little quick update about what's happening. And maybe what we'll do is we'll see some other picture behind Laurie when we do the next one, because she's already traveled somewhere. So that would be wonderful. How's that sound? Would you be willing to do that with us?
Sounds great to me.
Okay, that's wonderful. So to everyone, again, the Legacy Intention series, you can look it up on the playlist on YouTube and meet all the different people that I'm having these wonderful conversations with. And so on behalf of everyone who's viewing, Laurie, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen.